What if there was an easy yet effective way for you to bring focus to your subject? A compositional technique that you could use anywhere, whether you're at home, in a studio, or outside. Well, that, my friends, is where framing comes into play. Framing is one of my favorite photography compositional techniques, and I use it on pretty much every professional portrait photo shoot that I'm on. It's easy to use, easy to understand, and effective at drawing focus to your subject. So let's dive right in. So what is framing? Well, framing in photography is a compositional technique used to bring focus to your subject by placing them within elements that will help isolate your subject and draw the viewer's eyes toward them. And as I'll show you later, these elements can be anything, such as a hallway, a doorway, tree branches, a bridge, etc. For example, here's an image I took framing my subject between two palm trees. Also, don't confuse this technique with its close compositional cousin, frame within a frame, which is another photography composition technique that has to do with placing your subject within a literal frame within the scene. Here's an example of a photo that I took that demonstrates frame within a frame. So notice how he is enclosed on all four sides. While frame within a frame often entails enclosing your subject on all four sides with a literal frame, successful framing in photography doesn't require an enclosing of your subject on all four sides. So if a literal frame meant enclosing on all four sides, bottom, top, left, and right, you can achieve regular framing by enclosing one side, two sides, three sides, or all four sides. Here's an easy way to think about it. Every photo that uses frame within a frame composition is also using framing composition, but not every photo using framing composition is necessarily using the frame within a frame composition. So now that we know the definition and the difference between framing and frame within a frame, let's look at some different ideas you can try, and as well as example photos I took using framing. The first example of framing in photography is using trees. The beautiful thing about trees is that you can pretty much find them anywhere unless you live in the desert, of course. But in all seriousness, trees are readily available in many environments, from urban to rural settings. They come in various sizes, shapes, and types that allow for creative flexibility. Trees create easy and effective framing elements due to their solid structure. They also have many lines, shapes, and texture that can help add some dynamism to your image and fill in blank areas. You can place a tree on one side of your subject, or my go-to is to place my subject between two trees so they are on the left and right side of my subject. The second example of framing in photography is using leaves and branches. I found if you're going for close-up portraits of your subject, then using the leaves or branches of a tree are perfect framing elements. The intricate shapes and patterns also add visual interest to your image, which is always good. When using the leaves or branches as your framing elements, there's no right or wrong way here, and you'll just have to go with their natural layout. For example, a branch might be above your subject's head that will act as a framing element from above. Or in this example, you can see there were leaves above and to the right of my subject that acted as great framing elements. Poles are another great framing element example that you can use in your images. They are geometrically simple and can add structure and visual interest to your images as well. Poles can act almost like a line through your image, helping divide your frame, which will draw emphasis and focus to your subject if done correctly. Here's a photo I took of my subject frame on the right side by flagpoles. Another example of a great framing element are fences. Fences can act as easy framing devices while also creating natural strong lines and patterns. The linear structure of fences can guide your viewer's eyes through the photo, adding both a leading line while framing your subject. Fences also generally have a lot of texture to them, whether it's weathered wood or metal bars, so this can also add a tactile element to your image, making it a bit more interesting. The fifth example of framing in photography is using roads. So similar to fences, roads can act as both leading lines and framing elements within your scene. Roads are also just easy to find. Just be sure they aren't being actively used by cars, and always practice caution if you are near cars. The directional aspect and converging lines of roads are terrific at adding perspective and depth to your images as well, drawing the viewer into your image. By placing your subject in the middle of the road, you can also use them as framing elements. Lights, whether artificial or natural, are another great tool for framing in photography. Lights can illuminate your subject while simultaneously drawing your viewer's eyes to them. By strategically placing your subject within two sources of light, you can emphasize the focal point in the middle. The interplay of light and shadow and contrast created from this also does a great job of naturally drawing attention to the image while also adding depth. Here's a photo I took where I framed my subject in between two strips of neon lights. The final example of framing in photography is using the subject's own hands. Yes, you can use your subject's own hands as framing elements. You can do this by getting in close and having your subject place their hands under their chin to act as a framing element from below. Or you can have your subject place their hands on either side of their face to frame their face from the side. As a portrait and headshot photographer, I love using hands as framing elements because it's very subtle and natural, and it can be used as a posing reference for your subject, as well as so they have something to do with their hands. So I've touched on the definition of framing, examples, and types, but how do you actually go about looking for these framing elements and then using them effectively in your photos? By following 3 simple steps, you can start using framing in your photography today. The first step to using framing is to first pick a subject. Your subject can be anything from a person to an inanimate object. You can even do this exercise with me right now. Look around you and pick a subject. It could be a water bottle on your desk, the mouse on your desk, or a plant. I'm going to choose the water bottle on my desk for this example. Once you have picked your subject, the second step is to find your framing element, or elements. Consider the type of framing I mentioned earlier, such as natural frames, architectural frames, and body frames. For example, let's say you picked a water bottle to be your subject for this example. Look around you. What do you see that could act as framing elements? This could be anything from a doorway, other water bottles, a wall, etc. And remember, you don't have to move far away from where your subject originally is to find a framing element. What I mean by this is that usually when I'm out on paid client portrait shoots, we take photos at a particular scene and I just look for framing elements within that particular scene. I don't tell my subject to walk a far distance with me to a road or something just to use it as a framing element. I look around in our current scene and identify particular framing elements. For example, if I see buildings behind my subject, then I might place my subject in between those buildings to frame them. Or if there are trees and branches, I may have my subject stand under the branches near the tree to frame them under that. My point is, if you're in a particular location, you can find framing elements in your current scene and you don't have to move far looking for some. I mean, you can even use the horizon line as a framing element from above, like I did in this example. The third step to using framing is to place your subject within or near the framing element. So going back to the example of my water bottle, I'm going to frame it with framing elements in my room. So these photos aren't winning any awards or anything, but my goal is to just show you how easy it is to frame your subject and that you can practice it right after this guide with everyday items lying around your house. First, we have framing on both sides. So remember, you can place the subject in the middle of 2 framing elements to frame your subject on both sides. Here's what it looks like when I don't use framing. Now here's what it looks like when I use the closet lines as framing elements and place my subject, the water bottle, within them. Second, we have framing on one side. So you can get close to a framing element and then use that to frame your subject on one side. In this example, I'm doing it incorrectly because I'm not close enough to my framing element on the right. Now here's what it looks like when I get closer to my framing element so the focus is on the water bottle. Third, we have framing on all sides. Or you can use 3 or 4 sides to enclose your subject, creating a more literal frame. Here I frame my water bottle with a picture above it, door to the right, table on the bottom, and guitar on the left. Here's what it looks like when I do it incorrectly, not putting it in the middle of all 4. Now here's what it looks like when I put it in the middle of all 4 framing elements to enclose it. As mentioned, I'm definitely not winning any prizes with these photos, but my goal was just to show you how easy it is to frame your photos so you can start practicing it and how you can get a much cleaner looking image by framing. To finish up this guide, I think it will be good to look at some photos, famous photos that use the framing composition technique. So here are examples of famous photographs that use framing techniques effectively. The first is Afghan Girl by Steve McCurry. This iconic portrait features a young Afghan girl with piercing green eyes, framed by the vibrant red fabric of her headscarf. The scarf serves as a natural frame, drawing attention to her intense gaze. The second is Migrant Mother by Dorothy Lang. In this powerful documentary photograph, the migrant mother from the Great Depression era, the face of the distressed mother is framed by her children's heads as they huddle together. This composition emphasizes the hardship of the time. The third is Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare by Henri Cartier-Bresson. Cartier-Bresson, known for his mastery of the decisive moment, in his photo Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare, captured a man mid-leap over a puddle in this photograph. The jumping figure is framed by the puddle's reflection and the surrounding urban elements. The fourth is Lunch Atop a Skyscraper by Charles Siebitz. This historic photograph, Lunch Atop a Skyscraper, shows construction workers eating lunch on a beam high above New York City during the construction of the Rockefeller Center. The subjects are framed by the beam they are sitting on and the line of rope to the right. The fifth is The Steerage by Alfred Stieglitz. Stieglitz's photograph, The Steerage, taken in 1907, captures passengers on a ship's steerage deck. The composition uses the railings and geometric elements to frame the various passengers, creating a striking and complex image. The sixth is Kissed by the Hotel de Ville. This romantic photograph captures a spontaneous kiss between a couple on a Parisian street. The city's architecture and the bystanders form a natural frame around this intimate moment. In conclusion, framing is an easy yet effective compositional technique that you can use to draw your viewer's attention and focus to your subject. As we saw, you can use framing anywhere and everywhere. And once you're aware of the different types of framing and framing examples, you'll start to see framing elements everywhere you go. So I hope you guys found this video helpful and that you can introduce framing into your own photography tool belt. Thanks for watching.